Okay, thank you. It's really great to be here. I assume most of you saw the screening that included one of my very early works. It's part of a series I did in the 1990s called Orillas a la Orilla, where I invited policemen from Mexico City to participate in videos, to come to my studio and shoot videos in kind of fictional or semi-fictional scenarios. So I will begin by showing a couple more from that series so that you can get a better idea of this early work, and then from there make my way to more recent works. Like I said, when I made this series in the 1990s, I was very much interested in making work that would, in a way, have a very direct relationship to what was going on in the city and the kind of reality of the day-to-day life, in Mexico City. I was part of an artist-run space called La Panaderia, which lasted for 9 years. It's a space that opened in 1994. And a lot of the artists, that were part of that space had a special interest in creating works that would be highly interactive with a very vibrant and special city. Because in those days, a lot of the museums were showing abstraction and art that somehow did not have a social dimension to it. So this series is kind of part of that moment, and for it I would go to my studio in the morning, grab my camera, then walk out to the streets, and then try to meet policemen, and then ask them to come back to my studio and interact with me in different performative kind of situations. So I will show you another one of this series. And then I will talk also about the one that's part of the screening series here.
Chingar a su madre, ¿qué es lo que quieres, cabrón?
¿Por qué me empuja, oficial? ¿Por qué me empuja, oficial?
Es más, llévate tu cámara.
¿Por qué me empuja?
Llévate tu cámara. Mira, güero, ya sácate a chingar a tu madre. Pareces joto, pinche marisco.
¿Qué pasa? Oiga, más respeto,
No,
¿no?
llégale de aquí, me cae.
Más respeto, oficial.
Lo que pasa es que te voy a romper la madre y todo va a pasar.
¿Pero por qué? Yo no he cometido ningún delito.
Bueno, ¿qué es lo que quieres? ¿Qué es lo que quieres? ¿Qué es lo que quieres?
Yo puedo filmar si yo quiero.
No, tú no vas a
Me da
filmar
la
a
gana.
nadie.
¿Por qué no?
Vete a firmar al zoológico.
Le voy a poner una demanda.
Pues a mí las demandas me las paso por el arco de Belé, cabrón.
Pero,
mejor ya sácate a chingar a tu madre porque me
va... de la ley.
No, estás equivocado. Ya mejor sácate a chingar a tu madre porque va a valer madre.
¿Pero
sácate a la verga.
Oiga,
¿No entiendes?
Yo puedo filmar si yo quiero.
Mira, mejor ya
Oiga,
vete,
yo conozco
retírate.
la Constitución.
Mira, lo que va a pasar es que te voy a dar en toda la madre.
¿Pero por qué?
Y si no entiendes.
¿Por qué, oficial? ¿Yo qué estoy haciendo?
¿Cómo por qué?
¿Yo qué hice?
Me estás sacando de mis casillas.
Tranquilícese.
De mi deber y tu capa.
Pero yo no estoy haciendo nada.
¿Cómo no?
Que yo puedo
¿Qué
filmar
me
si
tienes
yo
que estar
quiero.
filmando si yo no soy artista? Yo no soy artista.
Pero yo...
Te vuelvo a repetir, vas a hacer que me encabrone y me regrese, te voy a dar en la madre. Y aparte,
¿Pero por qué me ofende usted? ¿Por qué me ofende?
Gente como tú vale para pura madre, cabrón.
¿Pero por qué me
eso está
ofende?
la sociedad así.
Oiga, yo no lo ofendí.
¿Por qué me quieres faltar al respeto tomándome?
Que yo
retírate,
no le estoy faltando al respeto, lo estoy haciendo en
Mira,
verdad.
ya me estás...
Tranquilícese, oficial.
Cansando.
¿Por qué me golpea? Le voy a poner una demanda en la Contraloría mañana.
A mí la que quieras, a mí derechos humanos y tú me los paso.
Mañana le voy a poner una demanda, mañana mismo.
Pues antes de que me pongan la demanda te voy a dar en toda...
Is that real or fictitious?
So there's elements of that.
Yeah, that's the question that I precisely want you to ask yourself. And the answer is that it's both. I mean, it's a real policeman, but I asked him to perform. So in that sense, it is real and fictitious at the same time. You know, grew up watching a lot of television, being addicted to television. And in a way, you know, it's a medium that has a huge potential, but generally television, or the way we relate to television is in a very passive way. We kind of passively consume television. So from the very early on when I started working with the medium of video, I started to find ways to establish a more active relationship. And this kind of blurring of fiction and documentary is one of the strategies that I have found, because when you start asking yourself these questions, you become very much aware of representation, and you become very much aware of the person behind the camera, and therefore you're actively interpreting what you are watching. So you kind of, and you become also more implicated in the work. Yeah.
Just wonder how much is scripted too.
There's no script. I simply ask the policeman to engage in a fight with me, and then we did. So I just literally said, you want you to come to my studio and have a fight with me for the camera. And I remember the only thing he asked me was if he could get to insult me, and I said yes, and then he was happy to participate. So, and then I just turned on the camera and we just did it. And I remember editing this, the video is like a little over 5 minutes, I think, a little under 5 minutes. And I remember I had like 9 minutes. So I used almost everything, like the second half of it. We kind of took us a couple minutes to warm up, and then did it.
You had a question.
Will you pay him?
Yes, of course. Yes. Well, he's working.
Yeah. He's on duty.
He's on a different kind of duty. Yes. On a different kind of contract. No, yes, I have been working with non-actors for many years, and since very early on, I explained that I can potentially sell this in the market, and that for their time I pay them. So it's kind of part of the way I kind of always work, and of course it's also an incentive. Not the only one, but an incentive. Yes.
Worried that some people might see it, like where it was gonna get exposed.
All he did was his how you call this?
Badge.
His badge. He just turned it upside down. That's all. So he was not very worried.
No.
There are more important corruption cases to
fight
go
in Mexico,
to fight.
Yeah.
In Mexico or elsewhere,
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so I will show a very short, a very short excerpt of another one of this series.
How easy or difficult was to convince him to go to the studio?
It was very easy. I mean, I asked some policemen that didn't agree, and then kind of my policy was I'm not going to push them, So then I was just looking for ones that would be into it. So in this case was fairly easy. Yeah. There's like a combination in these videos. I mean, the way I see them between a lot of humor and violence, and it's kind of a weird combination of humor and violence there that's kind of happening. But in the other video that some of you saw, I hired a policeman to be mocked by somebody, like somebody kind of assaulting a policeman as a kind of fictional scenario. But then some neighbors saw it and called the policeman that was not in agreement with me.
Exactly.
So then the policeman that I had hired escaped, and then the other policeman came, but they saw a lot of the part of the clothing of that policeman, so they arrested me, and it's a whole video where I'm just going to the police car, and then they're asking me why do I have these things, and that they heard that a policeman was being beaten up, and so it's a whole process of me getting into the police car, etc. So each one of the videos, in a way, it's different because it's done with somebody else, and the ideas also change. So I will jump to a more recent work, not so recent, but more recent, which is a piece I made in 2011 called Octopus. And some of you that were in this is being now displayed in the Sur Gallery exhibition, so maybe some of you have seen it. I'll give a brief introduction and then show some excerpts as well of the video. So this piece is a piece that I did in Los Angeles. In 2011, I was invited to do a research residency at the Hammer Museum. And the Hammer Museum basically asked me to produce a new work in Los Angeles. And I had lived in Los Angeles because I did an MFA there, so it's a city that I know to a degree. So when I got there, I had just read a book that talked about the U.S. invasion in Guatemala and the also involvement of the U.S. in the Guatemalan Civil War. And then that made me think back of when I was living in Los Angeles. I went once to the Home Depot parking lot. And in the US, the parking lot of the Home Depot is where the undocumented workers gather to be hired as day laborers. So I had remembered that I had been that I had hired 2 guys from Guatemala, and then one of them had told me that he was an ex-guerrilla, that he had fought in the Guatemalan Civil War. So when I arrived in LA for this residency, I remembered having been there, and I went back to the parking lot of the Home Depot, and sure enough, I met some Guatemalan ex-guerrillas. And in the US, there's a tradition of reenacting the Civil War. You know, they do like Civil War reenactments. So I appropriated this tradition, and I decided to do a Guatemalan Civil War reenactment at the parking lot of the Home Depot, as a symbolic site in a way. So I put together a group of ex-military and ex-guerrillas from Guatemala, and we did this reenactment. And the name of the piece is Octopus because that was a nickname given to the United Fruit Company, which is a U.S. transnational company that at the time was like Guatemala's biggest landowner, and they had like a monopoly of the ports. So the Guatemalans nicknamed them the Octopus because they had their hands in everything, and they are at the when the president of Guatemala started asking them to pay taxes and in a way, challenging them, they went to the CIA, and that's kind of like the beginning of the US invasion to Guatemala. So I wanted to give immigration this kind of geopolitical perspective, because living in LA, usually when people talked about immigration, they talked about it in a domestic kind of way. They always talked about it inwardly, and I wanted to give it kind of this geopolitical and post-colonial dimension. So anyway, I will show some of the views, the installation views. This is at the Hammer Museum when it showed for the first time. So it's a 4-channel video installation with Home Depot buckets that can be used as seats in the center. And also it exists as a smaller 2-channel version that's being now showing at Sur Gallery. So I will show the 4 channels simultaneously, so you'll have to use your imagination.
Seulta. Oh. Hả? Ở chung ạ. Oh. Natsu. Nhưng mà là kas ku bia.
Okay, so the entire work piece is 18 and a half minutes. It's a non-linear work, but it's an 18 and a half minute loop, and we just saw maybe about 6 or 7 minutes.
Yeah, that's about it. And then I guess one of the things that I'm really interested in talking about this work is also the bystanders. Like they're so indifferent, and how are these people? How did they become cast into the role of protagonists as well? Right?
Yes.
Like they're not peripheral. They're really integral to the works. Specifically in Octopus.
Yeah, since I kind of conceived of this work, I really thought of the how you call it, the clients or the
Los clientes, yeah,
los
the
clientes,
clients, yeah.
clients or the consumers of the Home Depot as the real protagonists, you know, in a way. And of course, I also wanted to create a metaphor for the invisibility of these workers that are, you know, playing a huge role in the economy, but yet they're invisible. You know, they even are called aliens. You know, like illegal aliens, call them. So so I didn't get permission from the Home Depot. I did not know what was going to happen. I did not know how people would react. But this is what I kind of expected to happen, and sure enough, it happened. For instance, this last scene you just saw, I had been already kicked out 3 times, so I hit the cameras in a car, and so you could not see the production. I mean, all you could really see is 2 guys lying on the ground, and you know, that's how we operate in big cities. You know, everyone goes their own way, and we're kind of in our own world, all very busy doing I don't know what.
Do your actors end up seeing their own work?
Well, the bystanders did not know they were acting, so they did not see it. But the Guatemalan, you know, who were reenacting the war where they fought, I invited them because I showed this work at the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles, and they didn't come. But I did bring them DVDs. DVDs were still used in 2011. I did bring them DVDs, and I also published a book, so I brought it for them. But this work is really not meant, they know all too well their situation. But in LA, first of all, most people don't even know that the US invaded Guatemala to begin with. They call these guys Mexican even though they're from Guatemala, or Hispanic even though they're like native Mayans. So in a way, this piece is more meant for us, for the more privileged to kind of recognize ourselves in the Home Depot. When I started shooting, it's private property, is the parking lot of the Home Depot, and 3 minutes later the guards were already there. But I managed to explain what I was doing and to talk them into letting me stay. So they told me, when our supervisor comes, you have to go. And I was like, great. So then we kept going, and then the supervisor came about 3 hours later, and I also managed to talk him into letting me stay. I think they paid them really badly, and they were more sympathetic to me and to the project than to Home Depot. And then the supervisor told me, when my supervisor comes, then you really have to leave. And I think his supervisor, when she came, she kicked me out immediately. Like, she was like, if you're not out of here in like 2 minutes, I'm calling the cops. So that was 6 hours later, and I had like 90% of my footage. So then I had to go back another day for a few hours to do like the pickup shots of the signs. And that last scene that you saw, I begged the guards that I told them I would hide the cameras in the car, and I begged them to let me do that last scene and that they would never see me again. And they were super nice, and they were like, okay, do it fast, So it was a guerrilla shoot for sure. The planning took a long time. The shoot was fast, but the planning took a long time. I did sessions with them where they would show me the war moves. And yesterday I was talking to some guys from El Salvador who were there, and they told me that a lot of these moves are the moves that the School of the Americas shows, because the School of the Americas is in the US. They train all the dictatorships of the countries they invade with this very particular, military style. So I did a whole bunch of sessions with them, and since I knew I would have no control of the location, then I really wanted to have control of the things I could control. I really wanted to have it very tight. So I did a lot of storyboards and a whole choreography based, which was like an abstraction of the movements that they showed me. And I also have a very precise camera design, so that also the photographers that were helping me knew exactly what shots, and so all of that was planned ahead of time. I mean, to me, this was about the tension that was created between their bodies and the other bodies around, and these kind of two parallel realities that are in the same place at the same time, but they're kind of two dimensions that are kind of coexisting and almost not touching each other. Again, as a metaphor for this kind of documented and non-documented human beings that are inhabiting the same place.
Do you find that there's a power inequity between you as filmmaker and them as performer?
Again, this is not about them as individuals. This piece is about a system, so it is not about individuals. It is about, through this work, trying to really understand and map out a structural violence that is happening. So in that sense, again, this is not only about them, it's about us. Primarily, it is about us. Okay, so I will show you this more recent work. It's a piece that I made in Lima, in Peru, last October. It opened, so very recently. It's called Gravitational Collapse. For it, I was invited to work at a space in Lima that actually no longer exists. That was the last exhibition called Project. Well, it still exists, but they don't have a space anymore. It's called Proyecto Amil, and they basically had a space in a shopping mall that opened in the early 80s in Lima, and that by the time I worked there was almost empty, and it's about to be renewed. It's about to be restored and renewed. So a collector who is one of the partners in this company that's restoring the center decided to open an art space while they kind of finished kicking out everyone out of the stores to renovate it. So he created a white cube space within the shopping mall. But since my show was the very last in that space, he let me use a lot of the spaces where the stores were. And what I did is that I created kind of reconstructed all the facades of these old shopping mall spaces as if it was already the stores that were going to open in the new shopping mall. So it's this usually didn't exist there. Like I redid all the facades of a Starbucks, and iShop is the name of iMac stores in Latin America. And then what I did is that the interiors of the shop, I burned them. So they were kind of completely burnt. So of course there was a sharp contrast between the facades and then the interiors. And so when people that knew that space would come in, a lot of them assumed that the new shopping mall was already starting to open. And it was very funny. It kind of took them a few minutes to realize that was the work. That's a Krispy Kreme donuts. Delicious. Yeah, gravitational collapse, it's kind of a phenomenon in the universe, and that's how the black holes are made. So basically when a structure cannot hold its own weight, it collapses, and that's how black holes are made. So in a way, I was using this kind of phenomenon in the universe as a metaphor of neoliberalism, as a metaphor of the environmental collapse that we're going through right now. So kind of, again, consumer culture's kind of facade versus its...
its byproduct.
Uh-huh. So all of this is fake. And from afar, it looked very, very realistic, but when you got close, it kind of, was kind of, something was off. Oh, and we also had a problem because Zara was pissed off, and they threatened the owners of the new shopping mall to not sign the contract if they didn't take out their brand from the exhibition. And so it got censored for a couple of weeks. And then this collector was like, changed his mind, and he was like, oh, if they don't want to sign, screw them. So then we put back Zara into the exhibition. So this is a functional toilet in the shape of the Sumaya Museum. And this was a lot of fun, especially when I had a show at the MUAC Museum in Mexico City, and Carlos Slim called the dean of the university to try to get it out of the exhibit. So that was satisfactory. Oh, sorry, because he made a building that it's called that it's for a museum called Museo Sumaya, and in that building, regardless of of the fact that it's a museum, because it could be his offices, in a way, it's like a symbol of his power, and in a way, a symbol of neoliberal power, of the kind of power in this age, because he basically the telephone was public in Mexico, and then he is the one that when it became privatized, he basically bought the entire, so he's got like a monopoly of communications, and that's where he made his fortune. So in a way, he's this symbol of neoliberalism. So in 2014, there were close to 60,000 unaccompanied children that went from Central America to the US. And since I had done Octopus before, it was all over the news. And there was a big protest that was done in a little town called Oracle in Arizona, organized by a group called the Arizona Border Defenders, who are a militia of ex-military and ex-policemen. And they organized this big protest with like-minded groups, like ultra-nationalist groups from around the US, to oppose the entrance of these children. And since I had done Octopus, it's a subject that I'm interested in, so I was following it on the news, and I followed this big protest. And then I got invited by the Arizona State University Museum in Phoenix to do an exhibition, and they would produce a new work. So I asked them if they would be interested in a piece done about this subject. So they were happy with the idea, and I went to the town of Oracle, and I met the leaders of this militia. And I had a series of conversations with them, and I ended up making a work with them where they are performing, they're reenacting the protests that they did, and also they are performing actions that kind of relate to their ultra-nationalist ideology and their fantasies. So the name of the town is Oracle, but I also named the piece Oracle because I'm also referring to the Oracle Corporation, which is a corporation that is known to have ties to the CIA. And again, it's kind of an example of this kind of paradigm where, or of the conflict of interest between of government working for the interest of corporations, like in the case of the United Fruit Company, etc. So again, kind of using this crisis of neoliberalism as the backdrop for the resurgence of extreme nationalism around the world, not only in the US. Yes. Okay, so I will then, it's a 2-channel piece, so I will play some excerpts from it.
You mess with us and you're gonna mess with fire. And you're not gonna like that. You're really not. Because you're opening up hell. And you don't... We're not gonna tolerate it. We don't want it to happen. We don't want to be messed with. We just want to be left alone. We love you. We welcome you. Any race, creed, color, doesn't matter. Our arms are open. We hold an olive branch. But we won't be tolerated to be messed with. And we welcome you. We're the only country in the world that does. You think Russia's gonna welcome you? No, no way. But do it the right way. Don't do it the wrong way.
It was very funny because when I started having conversations with them, the first thing that they told me was that they were very angry because they felt that the government was no longer working for the people, but that the government was working for corporations. So in a way, I kind of incredibly found myself agreeing with them. That was a very good start. we kind of agreed. And of course that I do not agree at all with them with that you know, in thinking that nationalism is the answer to these problems. I think it's only making matters worse, and you know, extreme nationalism, it's just generating more violence. So all I told them was that I did not necessarily agree with them on everything, and that whoever watched my work then could make up their own mind. Mm-hmm. And they didn't care, like they were happy to participate.
Mm-hmm. I want to know how you feel about humor.
How I feel about humor?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, normally I deal with very, very unpleasant subjects, yeah, and issues that we really don't want to think about. So I found that humor has been a strategy that I have used in order to, have an element of seduction. Mm-hmm. So that, and also once you kind of laugh, you're already you enter the door already. So it's a strategy that I use in a way to kind of facilitate the entry to these dark places where the work takes you. So in a way, I would say it's a sort of a dark humor.
Yeah, completely.
Thank you very much.
Exciting. Thank you.